Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 66. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier on in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at BJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Hey, John, I'm doing great. We are both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
All right, great, Nick. Hey, so this episode is a slight departure. The interview subject, if I understand our notes correctly, is going to be me.
Yes, this is Inside the Mind of John White, sponsored by the John White School of Mentoring.
Well, I can hear a bunch of people clicking fast forward, so maybe we should explain before we lose any more listeners.
Yeah, so this week we're going to check in with John and see what life at Google's like. You know, we did the check-ins for you and me at VMware after the time we had spent there based on earlier this last year, and thought it'd be fun to see how Google is different for you, but how it's the same, and a little bit about the transitions. That sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great. So the 3-month check-in, I guess, because I think that's right about where I am, somewhere in there. Call it
Okay.
3 months.
We'll say 3 months.
Awesome.
So you should be past your probationary period, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, you never know.
That's true. You never know.
I'm such a loose cannon. Who knows how long I'll actually last, right?
That's for sure. So just right out of the gate, John, why don't you share with the listeners, what is your job at Google today besides, consulting on the actual Google search algorithm?
Right. So just to clarify, exactly 0% of my job involves consulting with the Google search algorithm. That's something that Nick insists should be part of my job for some reason. But aside from that, like what I actually do is very similar to what I did at VMware. I am talking to enterprise companies. The title is called Customer Engineer at Google, but it is in that family of sales engineers, right? Pre-sales, technical consulting, pre-sales engineer, sales engineer, solution engineer, many, many titles for a family of roles that has to deal with talking to customers, understanding their businesses, trying to figure out what it is they're trying to do technically, and then aligning a portfolio of products from the vendor to help them solve the problems that they have. So that's essentially what it is that I do. I joined sometime in October, and so I guess, like I said, it's been about 3 months now.
Okay. So the next logical one that comes to my mind is, what would make you want to pursue the SE role at a different company?
Sure, yeah. So I had some probably some issues like with like the specific sales territory that I had at Google, or sorry, at VMware, that were a contributing factor. Like the company is awesome. The people I was working with were awesome. I had a great rapport with my sales rep, still one of the best sales reps that I've worked with. My manager was terrific. My colleagues were terrific. The director was terrific. None of those really were the issue. It was kind of unexpected. Maybe that's another way to look at it. It was just maybe some specific problems with my sales territory, and then that led to me leaving and then wanting to pursue something different. Not go to a partner or anything like that. Just do what I'm doing, just maybe do it somewhere else.
Sure, that makes sense. And I think a lot of people who are listening can sympathize, maybe going after the same position at a different company for a nice change of pace or change of atmosphere. Now, what other roles had you thought about doing after gaining a pretty decent amount of experience as an SC at VMware?
Sure. So I did think about other roles, um, tech marketing, maybe inside the company, people management. I had kind of tentatively explored that. Um, hadn't really put much like development time into doing either of those things, and part of what I was looking at VMware was, would I, you know, feel uncomfortable or make other people feel uncomfortable having had, my specific concerns and complaints and then just moving to a different part of the company. Um, so I looked around. I certainly looked at the career site. I think VMware is pretty portable, like as far as like people are concerned. If there's a position inside the company, you certainly are allowed to apply for it. And I don't know that there's like a way to block you from leaving a role or anything like that. But I just looked at it, didn't see anything that was, just grabbed me and made me go, oh yes, I have to stay for this. So, I made some calls. I said, what is it that, I have that, I like? What is it that I can do with this? And, Google called me back and I started going through that process.
Cool. And Google, that's the situation you spoke about before where the recruiter kind of gave you a psychological lure, right? If you were looking, what or since you're not looking, what would make you be interested in this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That definitely, stuck in my mind. And, you know, a while later was the reason that, I called that person back. It's like, you know, you can't stop thinking about that. And then, when the opportunity comes up, when you actually are interested in maybe like, looking around, the person who like asked the best questions and was the most intriguing and, was still respectful of, where you were in your career at that point in time, gets the first call back. Right. So yeah, definitely.
And here's another one, John. How do you feel about moving to a competitor of your previous company?
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. Because I actually was a little bit concerned about that. When I was at VMware, Google had made some announcements about um, VM migration as a product. And so it felt like a little bit at the time, like, oh, like, you know, Google, in addition to, Microsoft Azure and Amazon AWS is coming after VMware virtual machines. And I think after the move, I'm a little bit less in that mindset. Like I I didn't think that was going to be a big part of it. Just investigating the products. So as part of the process of interviewing for the job, I did as much of a deep dive into the product portfolio as I could, and just virtual machines and virtual infrastructure was a pretty small part of what I saw in the portfolio, and it was very very different than than what I was actually kind of expecting. Um, way more developer tools, way more data warehousing, data analytics. Managed databases might have been like the closest thing as like um, maybe slightly up level from what VMware's doing, but just in retrospect, I think like there's probably more potential for partnership than there is for competition. Like I definitely see overlapping offerings, right? Like Google has Google Compute Engine, which is at its base virtual machines, virtual storage, virtual networking. I just think that they seem to be targeting a different audience and a different scale. Maybe I don't know exactly how else to say it. I'm sure that they wouldn't turn down people who are you know I don't even know exactly what that would be like if it's like a customer that's not virtualized at all and like Google and VMware going after them like that's almost nobody, right? Everybody is virtualized. So then what is it? Is it like a company that is like 100% VMware, and then Google somehow convincing them to move off of an on-prem platform. I mean, generally it's the other way around, right? Like a company is investigating how best to use the cloud, and I don't think in those situations, the number one use case is, okay, get all this infrastructure out of here, out of our data center. We're going to just shut this thing down in 9 months. And the first thing that we're going to do is pick a vendor to buy like millions of dollars of infrastructure from. I don't think it works that way. I think there's, very specific things that people want to do in the cloud, and things that, maybe are more appropriate. And I think there's quite a bit of overlap. And honestly, I think that technology spending is only increasing. So I think that there's probably room, hybrid cloud is something that you hear about. So and all of this is like really like specific to the to the industry that like VMware is in and Google is in. So I apologize for, deep diving into that. I just think that, again, maybe if I were to back up and go up a level, I think there's probably more partnership opportunity than competition opportunity. And as a result, it just didn't feel like I was going to a direct competitor.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Now, let's talk about some of the differences in what life has been like in this role at Google versus what it was like when you're SE at VMware. You mentioned the types of customers. You said enterprise. Does that mean the same thing as it did in VMware space?
No, I don't think it is. It does mean the same thing. And I'm probably, you know, um, probably both companies have some kind of definition of what, an enterprise customer is, and it probably has something to do with, a number of employees or amount of technology spend, or, um, uh, you know, size of customers. I just think that probably Google, because a lot of the portfolio has to do with um, cloud native companies, and companies that are born in the cloud that have never owned physical infrastructure, that they're probably focusing a little bit more on companies that just haven't ever bought a server and put it in a rack in a data center in the office, right? So that generally can be a smaller company, but maybe they have a large technology spend, despite the fact that they're, what VMware might consider, oh yeah, well, they don't have any data center spend. Well, I mean, they have technology spend, and they're, buying technology solutions that just might not be, on physical servers and storage arrays. So, just a slightly different, that probably that class of customers that um, people would call cloud native.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and sorry, just I don't want to imply that like all the customers are cloud native. It's just that, when you add that group of customers on top of what a traditional technology vendor would call an enterprise customer, it's just a different mix, right?
Right. Yeah. And what you don't want is for the cloud natives to get restless. Now, if I remember right, John, in your role at VMware, you were more of a field-facing resource, and I think you had to make a little change in that respect when you went to Google. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think that, in most organizations, when you have some role that is in the sales engineering side of things, mostly those are field resources, right? And what I mean by that is they live in the geographic region that they're serving. Most of the time, they don't sit in an office. They maybe have a home office, and a lot of their time is spent visiting customers at their locations. And Google, I think, is probably following that model, but because there are so many Google offices already, a lot of times what they're doing is asking those people to have a desk in one of the regional Google offices and come in and sit there, multiple days a week. So I went from being, a 100% field person, meaning deployed in the field, having a home office, and 99% of any work I did at a desk was, in my home office, to having a seat somewhere in a Google office, in this case in my case specifically, it's up in San Francisco. Um, and as a result, like I'm commuting into San Francisco multiple times a week, which is very new for me. It was quite different. I hadn't done that, gone to an office for work in like 6 years, so that was kind of a big change.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, did this affect your sleep and wake time habits a great deal or just a little bit?
It was actually, quite a big change, right? So if you are in the office by say 8:30 or 9, or whatever is reasonable in your mind, at least for me, San Francisco is like a maybe 45 or 50-minute commute. So that's 45 or 50 minutes earlier that I have to wake up. And uh, just because of the way the BART system, Bay Area Rapid Transit system works, it's like for me, getting on a train at like 4 o'clock is probably the best. So, um, yeah, yeah, getting into the office at a reasonable time, doing work there, and then leaving at a reasonable time, so I'm not like just jammed into a train with 20,000 of my closest friends fighting for a breath. Yeah, so but there's some benefits there too, right? Google's probably pretty famous for pioneering some of the perks of working at an internet company. So I could eat 3 meals a day while I'm in the office. I try to go home for dinner, uh, so so I'm not spending too much time in the office, but it is an option. There's a 4 o'clock snack that I've taken advantage of several times. Grab the snack and then walk out the door.
Nice. What about product and portfolio size? I know that in what I do and what you did at VMware, we are technical generalists across all products in the VMware portfolio. Is it similar at Google? And if so, how big is that portfolio?
Yeah, it's quite similar. The crossover and the style is very very similar. So I'm responsible for everything at a at least a 100 level. I'm asked to major in one thing and maybe have like a minor in something else. So I'm representing everything. I would say maybe except the G Suite. The Google Drive and Sheets and Docs and things like that. There's a kind of a specialist team, so it's very similar there. Um, Specialist teams to kind of dive deep when there's very specific high level things that customers need. At the same time, I'm asked to be maybe up to 200, even 300 on at least one thing. So I'm not overwhelming the specialists, and maybe even at a certain point building a POC. Um, Maybe not like a production pilot, but at least a POC.
And in terms of the structure of the greater team that you work with, are you mapped to one salesperson, a group of salespeople? How does that work?
I think that Google's trying to be flexible about that. So it seems to be varying by region, whether it's a one-to-one mapping or a one-to-two mapping or whatever it is that you want to do. Like I think um, last year it seemed to be one-to-one, and at least in the enterprise this year, it seems to be wherever the team needs you in the sales reps that you're covering. So I, it that might change. They're trying to be super flexible and accommodate a whole lot of growth. So um, that's maybe something we can talk about later. As maybe one of the differences that I've seen in the company is just the amount of growth.
Yeah, that could be an interesting topic for sure. Now, one of the things you had to get used to in moving to Google was moving from Office 365 to G Suite. How'd that go?
Yeah, it's not going to let me just mention there's a G Suite team and walk away from it, right? Yeah, so that was actually something that I took, honestly, in retrospect, like an embarrassingly, uh, I put a lot of emphasis on. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to have to not use Word and Excel and PowerPoint. I actually thought like, wow, that'll be difficult, and I don't even know how I test it. Like, not even thinking, of course I use Google Docs, of course I use Google Sheets, and I absolutely can put together like a Google presentation together to test it all out. I mean, I moved over. It was, I don't want to say that it was trivial, but it kind of was trivial. And if anything, maybe I was just never like an Office 365 power user or something, but the Google Docs, like, I've been in meetings with my teammates and we're all taking notes in the same doc, in real time live. And that's just not something that I was used to doing in any kind of Microsoft tool. Maybe it's totally possible. I've heard that there are tools to do that. I just never experienced them, and it's just a level of collaboration that you know, that kind of got unlocked where you can, write a document, tag somebody in it, and they automatically receive a task to do something with the document, and then they review it and resolve the document. It is just, again, like, just pretty collaborative in a way that I wasn't used to. It's been really good.
Now, in terms of the computer you use, is it Windows, Mac, or are you actually using some kind of Chrome device?
Yeah, so that's another thing that I, maybe took an embarrassingly long pause at, but I showed up on my first day and sitting at my chair was a Pixelbook, which is Google's uh, home branded Chromebook. And that was, I took a deep breath there. I was like, ooh, I don't know what my options are. I don't know what to do. And it ended up like in the middle of the orientation, they're like, yeah, try this for a few weeks. And if in the first, I don't know, 3 weeks, you want to swap it out for something else, here's your options. So, but just try it out. And honestly, at the end of that time, I didn't, I didn't swap it out. I was like, this is actually pretty cool. It's a cool piece of hardware. I don't want anybody to think that I'm like selling Pixel books or anything like that. That's certainly not something that's in my purview. But now I'm kind of a convert. I'm trying to figure out if that's because I work for the company or if it actually is pretty cool. But again, like I said, I had the option to swap out for a MacBook or some other Windows device, and I didn't take it. I was like, no, this is working great.
So we'll put John's affiliate link in the show notes for everybody. So how about this one, John? You went from a sales engineer role at one company to a sales engineer role at another. Do you have any advice on the process of moving to a different company but a similar role for listeners out there?
Yeah, I think that's part of career growth and managing your career to be portable, right? I think we talked about it. You never know when you might need to pick up and move for internal reasons or external reasons. And one of the things that I focused on was being a better sales engineer. Um, so that was a couple things for me, because I was calling on large customers. you know One of the really important things was for me was understanding that customer and understanding their problems. There's a number of ways to do that. Researching, public documents that they have to file with the SEC, um, you know, other data sources, things that they're just talking about openly and publicly at their, annual conferences, just following all that stuff. All of those skills are very portable, right? So when I was going through the interview process and they asked me about what I would do, I told them I felt very comfortable doing that because it's something that I had done. And my customer mix over time changed, so I was used to doing all that work for a brand new customer over and over again. So if somebody assigns me a brand new customer, here's kind of the process I go through to figure out what I can glean from publicly available information before I go and talk to them. And then in talking to them, I had kind of thought through that process of what is it that I do to understand a customer's business issues, right? Not necessarily pure technical problems, but problems and things that there's actually funding to solve. That thought process, I'm very grateful to VMware, uh, for teaching me, about that. And I think I've been hopefully pretty open about, how awesome I thought that training was, and um, that that new way of thinking really affected me. Right? I went, oh, geez, I wish I'd known about this when I was in operations. Like I would have been better at selling my ideas for getting things done internally. So, um, but yeah, those skills are portable, right? But you have to think about exactly what it is that you do and exactly what that skill set is, and think if I think about myself as a product, what is that product? It's a bundle of skills and capabilities, and what are those things? What is it that I bring to the table? And that's going to be different for every person, right? Like I can't say that one of, like, the things that I was selling was my ability to set up a home lab and do things, because and come up with, like, write exciting new scripts and code on my own, because that's not something that I actually did a whole lot of at VMware. My strengths lay in other areas, maybe more empathy for the business side, and so that's what I kind of focused on, right? My strengths.
And here's one I forgot to mention before. How do you feel about taking this job and not having a lot of experience with the Google Cloud products? Because I didn't think you had a lot of experience there.
No, I didn't. I mean, I had some, like my V Journeyman blog is hosted on Google Cloud, in the compute engine, right? I just rent like a $4 or $5 a month virtual machine and run WordPress on it. And this uh, Nerd Journey podcast WordPress instance is also on Google Cloud engine. So that is kind of scratching the surface of what Google's portfolio is. It's maybe like if you went to VMware and said, hey, I know about your desktop virtualization product, not virtual desktop, but like, VMware Fusion or VMware
Workstation.
Workstation. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I got there. Or if you went to, like, a Dell Enterprise, company, an enterprise storage group, and said, well, I, I own a Dell laptop. It's certainly not the same, but I had scratched the surface. So, I was able to, I already had an account. Um, Actually, anybody that has a Gmail account really can go over to Google Cloud and check that stuff out. And then actually in the process of interviewing, they sent me some credits to, like, spin up more infrastructure and play around with it and educate myself more, which, I, the amount of credits that they gave, it was like enough to do what I had already done. So I didn't really, I'd already, spun up VMs and, things like that. So, you know, um, but if I hadn't, then I definitely could have, again, as part of that interview process. They were pretty cool about that. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Because that was going to be my next question. It seems like based on what you said, HR, your hiring manager, they didn't mind that you didn't really have much experience with the product set coming in.
No, I don't know that, any, like, young growing company can really hire for that, for, tons of experience with our product. I think VMware is maybe in a unique situation with a mature product set, that people can say, well, VMware's been in the market for like over 20 years now, right? So you can't have necessarily 20 years experience with the most recent version of VMware products, but you can be like a, decades long user of VMware products. So, you know, Google Cloud, is younger than that. Some of the products are maybe in that, same time frame, but, Google Cloud as an organization is much younger. So, I think mostly, I mean, this is just my outside, observation. It seems to be, they're interested in hiring people with varied backgrounds, not necessarily with specific experience with the product, because that would be too limiting. So, people with coding backgrounds, people who have been CIOs or CTOs, and people who are experienced sales engineers. So, all of those are valid, you know, pools for hiring, I think. At least those are the types of people that I've run into. So,
Okay, cool. Now, because of the lack of experience with the product set, did your manager place any specific education, certification requirements on you?
yeah, actually, it didn't even come from the manager. It was kind of like a general onboarding process. It's like, here's like your first 8 weeks at Google as a customer engineer are kind of already mapped out. Here's the general thing. You might not do everything in the exact order and the exact timeline that they're asking you to do, but here it is. It's all mapped out. So the professional cloud architect certification is something that they wanted achieved, and they were kind of thinking, yeah, by week 8, you should probably have that done. I think week 12 is when I actually got it done, or week 14. I'm not exactly sure. My time of hire kind of it fell like right in those holidays. I tried to get it done right before and just didn't work out the timing. So I got it done in early January, but it was, really educational. Again, way more exposure to the portfolio of products, which, to be honest, I had kind of a blind spot about Google Cloud before, kind of initiating the process. So it was a great education, a great overview of everything that was available. I mean, it actually included, G Suite, which I didn't really have an interest in selling, and fortunately, that's not something that I'm selling. But if that's something that you're interested in, and then uh, you know, there it is. Like, the education's there, and I guess once you're inside Google, like, you can kind of port those skills anywhere within the organization.
Yes, and they will make you a believer in G Suite as they have with John.
My affiliate code will be in the description somewhere.
Yeah, affiliate code, referral link, we'll get them all. Absolutely. Hey, John, you know what? I think listening back on this, we've got enough for 2 episodes here. So why don't we just cut it right there this time? Does that sound good?
Yeah, awesome. We'll do the rest as 67 some other time, or maybe even next week.
Yeah, the suspense is killing me. Just a reminder, we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter at Nerd Journey.
All right, farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at VJourneyman, for Nick Cordy at Network Nerd _, signing off.
Adios.